You've been taught that life unfolds randomly, that coincidences mean nothing, that events just happen without pattern or purpose. But what if every seemingly random encounter, every unexpected moment, every strange repetition you've ever experienced was actually a direct conversation between you and the intelligence that governs reality itself? Jung named it synchronicity. Neville Goddard called it the bridge of incidents. These weren't just theories. They were maps to a hidden dimension of existence, where your inner world and outer circumstances are in constant, precise dialogue. When a person crosses your mind and appears moments later, when the same symbol haunts your awareness across different contexts, when answers arrive before you've finished forming the question, reality is not being random. It's responding to something deeper within you. And those who've learned to consciously participate in this exchange, their lives have transformed in ways that seem impossible to those still believing in chance. The signs you're dismissing right now are the exact coordinates guiding you toward your next evolution. Every ignored synchronicity is a missed message from the organizing principle behind all things. And once you understand how to decode this language, you'll realize you're not watching life unfold. You're actively writing it. Most people operate under a fundamental misunderstanding. They perceive reality as a series of disconnected happenings, random collisions of circumstance that have nothing to do with their internal experience. But every single moment you encounter is actually a precise reflection of the consciousness you're holding. Jung spent decades documenting this scientifically, tracking how inner states manifested as outer events with mathematical regularity. Goddard took it further, running practical experiments with thousands of individuals who learned to deliberately activate this principle. His 1961 work, The Law and the Promise, contains documented case after documented case of people who discovered they weren't victims of circumstance, but architects of experience. What's happening beneath the surface of your awareness is an ongoing exchange between the field of consciousness you occupy and the version of reality that crystallizes around you. Jung identified this as synchronicity, meaning connected by significance rather than linear cause and effect. Quantum physics would later validate what these pioneers already understood. The observer doesn't just witness reality, the observer selects it. When you sustain a particular internal frequency with genuine depth and consistency, the universe reorganizes visible circumstances to mirror that frequency back to you. The evidence surrounds you constantly. Someone you haven't contacted in years suddenly reaches out the same day you thought of them. A symbol you dreamed about keeps appearing in your waking life until you can no longer ignore it. You need something specific, and someone offers exactly that without you mentioning it. These aren't flukes. They're proof of an intelligence that's tracking your consciousness and responding accordingly. Goddard showed that when you occupy the feeling state of already having what you desire, when you embody it so completely that it feels real in your body, a sequence of seemingly unrelated incidents begins assembling itself. People you need show up. Doors you didn't know existed open. Barriers dissolve. And here's what most people miss. You're already doing this unconsciously. You're generating synchronicities based on whatever mental and emotional patterns you're running by default. When you become aware of this process, when you start recognizing the messages embedded in meaningful coincidences, something fundamental shifts. Life stops happening to you and starts happening through you. You become a conscious participant in the conversation. October 1913. Jung experienced a vision so disturbing, he thought he was losing his mind. He saw a massive yellow wave sweep across Europe from the North Sea to the Alps, carrying the wreckage of civilization and countless bodies. The vision returned repeatedly over 2 weeks, intensifying each time. He documented it meticulously in his private journals, convinced he was descending into madness. Then July 1914 arrived. World War I erupted. The yellow wave was mustard gas. The bodies were real. Jung realized something profound. He'd intercepted a pattern forming in the collective field before it materialized physically. Certain individuals, he understood, function as receivers for shifts still organizing in the invisible layers of reality. They pick up the signal before the manifestation. Goddard identified this same mechanism operating individually. Consider someone who dreamed repeatedly of a particular house, every detail vivid and specific, the color, the architecture, the garden layout. Months later, driving through an unfamiliar city, they found that exact house for sale. The owners had only decided to sell 3 days earlier, but the decision had been gestating for months due to a job transfer that wasn't yet confirmed. What Jung and Goddard both discovered, working independently, is that future events cast shadows backward through time. These shadows emerge as premonitions, symbolic dreams, or sudden inexplicable knowing. When consciousness enters certain receptive states, it can detect these temporal ripples before the actual event solidifies. Goddard called this the bridge of incidents. When you anchor your awareness on a specific outcome, holding it as already accomplished, events begin organizing themselves in the unseen field. On the surface, these events appear unrelated. Someone mentions something in passing. You notice a particular advertisement. An unexpected call comes through. You stumble upon a specific book. Each incident seems meaningless alone. But together, they form a precise pathway between your current position and the reality you've claimed internally. Goddard documented the case of a man who visualized being in Barbados despite having no money for travel. Within 2 weeks, a former employer contacted him about temporary work requiring his presence in Barbados, all expenses covered. The employer reported he'd dreamed about this man 3 consecutive nights, beginning exactly when the visualizations started. The bridge had formed. The invisible architecture reveals itself through specific patterns. Objects break at symbolically significant moments, marking the completion of cycles. Locked doors suddenly open when new phases are ready to begin. Animals appear in repetition, the same bird, the same butterfly, punctuating moments of transition. Jung cataloged hundreds of these occurrences. One patient, highly resistant and rational, dreamed of a golden scarab, an ancient Egyptian rebirth symbol. During her next session, as she described the dream, a rare golden beetle tapped against Jung's office window. He opened it, caught the insect, and handed it to her with the words, "Here is your scarab." That synchronicity shattered her intellectual defenses. The transformation that had been blocked for months happened within days. Goddard taught that these patterns follow exact laws, not mystical randomness. First, assume the feeling of wish fulfilled, not abstract visualization, but full sensory immersion in already possessing what you're claiming. Second, maintain this state particularly before sleep, when your conscious mind releases control. Third, observe without anxious monitoring as the incidents assemble. Anxiety disrupts the process. When you constantly check whether it's working, you're broadcasting doubt, and the field responds with more reasons to doubt. When you rest in the certainty that it's already done, the synchronicities accelerate. Resources appear. People show up with exactly what's needed. Obstacles that seemed immovable simply vanish. The invisible patterns never stop communicating. That sudden urge to call someone? They needed to hear from you. That inexplicable impulse to avoid a particular route. An accident occurred there minutes later. That absolute knowing that something specific would happen, and it happened precisely as you knew. You've experienced all of this already. You've known the phone would ring before it rang. You've thought of someone who then appeared. You've felt something important approaching and watched it arrive. These moments reveal your natural participation in the cosmic exchange. The universe constantly signals what's forming beneath visible reality. The real question is, how do you develop the sensitivity to read these signals reliably? March 1909. Freud was in the middle of arguing against paranormal phenomena when something extraordinary interrupted his materialist certainty. Jung had come to visit him in Vienna, and as they discussed these topics, Freud held his position firmly, dismissing any legitimacy to such experiences. During Freud's arguments, Jung began feeling an intense physical heat concentrating in his diaphragm, growing stronger and stronger until it became nearly unbearable. At the peak of this sensation, a loud, sharp crack burst from Freud's bookshelf. Both men jumped. Jung, still experiencing the strange heat, said calmly, "This is exactly what we're discussing. And to demonstrate it's a genuine phenomenon, I predict another crack will occur immediately." Seconds later, an identical sound erupted from the same shelf. Freud went pale. Jung later wrote about the look of horror on Freud's face, the horror of watching his entire worldview crack along with the sounds from the bookshelf. Their relationship never fully recovered. Jung had proven that intense internal states generate measurable external effects. In The Law and the Promise, Goddard mapped the precise mechanics of this phenomenon. He established that feeling is the creative secret. Imagination provides the form, but feeling provides the force. When you unite a clear mental image with the visceral sensation of its reality, you activate the mechanism that generates corresponding synchronicities. Consider this illustration. A woman wanted her estranged brother to return home after years of separation. She didn't try to persuade him. Instead, every night before falling asleep, she would imagine him sleeping in the next room. She heard his breathing patterns. She felt his presence in the house. She experienced the relief and joy of having him home. After 3 weeks of this nightly practice, her brother called to say he'd decided to return. He reported feeling an inexplicable pull toward home that began exactly when she started the practice. The universe responds to what you feel in your depths, not what you think on the surface. Superficial thoughts create nothing. Deep feeling reorganizes reality. Goddard discovered that the emotional frequency you consistently occupy determines what types of synchronicities manifest in your experience. Here's an example. A businessman facing bankruptcy chose to cultivate prosperity feeling instead of panic. Every night he counted imaginary money, felt the texture of bills, experienced the sensation of financial security. He didn't visualize vaguely. He felt specifically. Within 2 weeks, an old client who owed a sum he'd written off as lost appeared voluntarily to pay the debt with interest. The client said he'd been haunted by an inexplicable compulsion to settle this obligation. The principle operates through a specific mechanism. Your emotional states broadcast frequencies into the unified field of consciousness, which responds by organizing corresponding events. Sustained anger magnetizes conflict. Authentic gratitude attracts more to be grateful for. deep fear manifests precisely what's feared. Jung observed this clinically across thousands of patients. Those carrying profound guilt consistently attracted external circumstances that punished them. Those who cultivated genuine self-acceptance discovered unexpected acceptance in their world. The patterns were too consistent to dismiss as random. The external world functions as a mirror of internal reality, but an active mirror that assembles events to match the reflection. Goddard moved beyond observation into practical application. He taught that the optimal moment to impress the subconscious with specific feelings is the threshold between waking and sleeping, what modern neuroscience calls the hypnagogic state. In this liminal moment when you're nearly asleep but still conscious, brainwaves slow, the critical faculty relaxes, and feeling can be planted directly into the consciousness substrate that organizes reality. He documented a secretary who used this technique to manifest a specific promotion. Every night she fell asleep embodying the executive she intended to become. Not hoping, not wishing, experiencing. She felt the weight of responsibility, the respect from colleagues, the satisfaction of the role. 6 weeks later, a corporate restructuring created exactly the position she'd been inhabiting internally, and she was chosen unanimously. The time between sustained feeling and external manifestation varies. The more natural and complete the feeling, the faster the response. The more doubt or contradiction you carry, the slower and more distorted the manifestation. Goddard found that most people sabotage the process by feeling the opposite of their desire during waking hours, canceling the nighttime work. The feeling must be protected and maintained. When you plant a seed, you don't excavate it daily to check for growth. When you imprint a feeling into the consciousness substrate, you trust the process while the incident bridge forms. The synchronicities that appear confirm the process is active, signals that the universe is responding to your dominant internal frequency. In 1916, Jung drew his first mandala without understanding what he was creating. Circles within circles, geometric patterns flowing spontaneously through his hand. Weeks afterward, Richard Wilhelm sent him a manuscript of the ancient Chinese text, The Secret of the Golden Flower, which he wanted Jung to translate. The text contained the identical mandala Jung had drawn. He'd never seen the manuscript. Wilhelm had no knowledge of Jung's drawings. This event crystallized Jung's understanding that specific symbols exist independently in the collective consciousness field. They emerge spontaneously across different cultures, eras, and individual minds, because they're fundamental patterns through which consciousness organizes and expresses itself. Wilhelm, who translated the I Ching for Western audiences, documented thousands of consultations where the oracle's responses were impossibly precise. The mechanism reveals itself clearly. You formulate a question, throw coins, and the resulting pattern points to one of 64 hexagrams. Jung consulted the I Ching regularly, disturbed by its capacity to address complex questions through apparently random symbols. The explanation lies in symbols functioning as bridges between consciousness dimensions. Goddard discovered that when someone visualizes with emotional clarity, corresponding symbols begin appearing in physical reality as confirmations. To grasp the mechanism, imagine someone repeatedly visualizing a specific ring, gold band, oval blue stone. They drew every detail, memorized every curve. 3 months later, in a distant city, someone they'd just met produced a box from their pocket, explaining they'd been carrying this object for months waiting to find the right person. It was the exact ring. Numbers operate as direct communication codes. Repeated numerical sequences aren't coincidental pattern recognition. Their specific frequencies indicating alignment or misalignment. Waking at 3:33 for weeks consecutively. Repeatedly checking the clock at 11:11, receipts totaling $4.44 without calculation. Each numerical pattern carries specific information about the bridge between your internal and external worlds. Jung meticulously documented animals appearing as symbolic messengers at precise moments. One patient resistant to deep change received visits from a particular crow whenever she considered abandoning therapy. The crow, an alchemical symbol for transformation through darkness, appeared exclusively during these resistance moments. When she finally broke through her psychological barriers, the visits stopped permanently. Symbol materialization follows precise laws. Goddard found that visualization combined with genuine feeling produces cascades of symbolic confirmation. A teacher imagining herself living in California started finding golden bears everywhere. The state symbol appeared in impossible to orchestrate contexts, forgotten magazines in cafes, store window displays changing as she passed, television channels showing California bear documentaries at the exact moment she turned on the TV. 2 months later, a chain of apparently disconnected events relocated her there. Physical objects respond to deep internal shifts by breaking, appearing, or vanishing at symbolically meaningful moments. Clocks stop at the instant of major decisions. Photographs fall from walls when relationships internally conclude. Items lost for years surface when you're ready for what they represent. Words function as modern oracles through accidentally overheard conversations, billboard phrases answering internal questions, books falling open to specific pages. The consciousness field orchestrates these events with surgical precision. You question a decision and immediately hear a stranger speak the exact answer on their phone. Not coincidence. Communication. Dreams operate as the most direct interface with this symbolic field. Goddard documented people dreaming complete addresses of houses they later purchased, detailed faces of future partners years before meeting, specific scenes they later lived identically. One businessman repeatedly dreamed of a golden lion without understanding its meaning. Weeks later, he received a transformative proposal from Golden Lion Corporation, a company whose existence he'd been unaware of during the dreams. Symbols transcend linear time because they exist in the field where past, present, and future are simultaneous. Your consciousness focused on a specific outcome activates corresponding symbols that appear as cosmic breadcrumbs guiding you through the incident bridge. Each symbolic appearance calibrates your trajectory, confirming alignment or signaling necessary course corrections. Learning the universe's symbolic language transforms how you perceive reality. Random events reveal themselves as precise communications. Coincidences show themselves as confirmations. Obstacles appear as symbolic redirections toward better paths. You recognize you're in constant dialogue with an intelligence that responds through symbols, transforming life into a living text where every element carries meaning and direction. Specific people enter your life at the exact moment your internal states summon them. Goddard discovered that each significant person you encounter emerges as an external manifestation of assumptions you're holding internally. The mechanism is precise. You sustain a deep belief about yourself or life, and the universe organizes encounters confirming that belief. A lonely widow began internally assuming she was loved and valued. She didn't wait for external proof. She claimed the state first. Within 3 weeks, she received a letter from a childhood friend who'd been dreaming of her repeatedly and felt an irresistible impulse to reconnect. During the same period, 2 other distant friends made independent contact. None knew about the others. All reported the same inexplicable compulsion to reach out. The principle, "everyone is you pushed out," means each person in your experience represents an aspect of your consciousness manifested externally. The critical boss mirrors your internal self-judgment. The loving partner reflects your self-worth. The betraying friend manifests your trust beliefs. Changing external encounters requires changing the internal state producing them. Jung observed this pattern in his clinical work for decades. Women who experienced paternal abandonment consistently attracted emotionally unavailable men. Men fearing intimacy found only partners confirming relationships were dangerous. The patterns showed mathematical precision. When internal states shifted through therapeutic work, the type of people attracted shifted correspondingly. Goddard transcended psychological observation into active technique. He taught specific methods to summon people through assumed states. One salesman consistently visualized ideal clients, not specific individuals, but the quality of interaction he desired. He imagined easy conversations, quick decisions, mutual satisfaction. His revenue tripled within 2 months. Difficult clients vanished. People perfectly matching his visualization began seeking him out. Love at first sight operates through this mechanism. 2 people recognize each other instantly because each is manifesting what the other was internally summoning. The magnetic pull they experience is the consciousness field, signaling complementary internal pattern alignment. This explains why relationships initiated from different consciousness states produce drastically different outcomes. Consider someone desperately seeking employment. The more desperate she became, the more rejection she received. Every interviewer seemed to sense her neediness and withdraw. When she changed internally, assuming the feeling of being wanted and valuable, the same types of interviewers responded differently. Within 2 weeks, 3 offers arrived. Different interviewers, but all manifesting the same pattern: immediate value recognition. Encounter synchronicities follow identifiable patterns. You think intensely about someone unseen for years, and they appear. This occurs because your intense thought creates a field disturbance the other person registers unconsciously as an impulse to make contact. Goddard discovered that visualizing specific conversations with absent people frequently resulted in those people initiating contact using the exact visualized words. Now, what we've explored today about synchronicity and the bridge of incidents is really just one frequency in a much larger system of conscious reality creation. If you're feeling called to understand the complete mechanics of how consciousness broadcasts and reality responds, how to move from unconsciously generating synchronicities to becoming a deliberate transmitter, I've mapped out the entire framework in my book, Beyond the Frequencies, a quantum guide to consciousness mastery. It takes you through the 9 master frequencies, from breaking free of survival static all the way to embodying the field itself. It's linked in the pinned comment below. Strangers appear as angels when you sustain certain states. A woman lost in a foreign city maintained calm certainty of being safe and guided rather than panicking. A local approached offering help before she asked. He took her exactly where she needed, refused payment, and disappeared. She later learned he'd changed his usual route that day following a hunch. Toxic relationships persist because we internally feed the state sustaining them. Goddard taught that attempting to change the other person is futile. Transformation happens when you change your assumption about the relationship. One wife consistently visualized her alcoholic husband as sober, kind, and present. She didn't criticize or demand change. She maintained the image internally. He voluntarily sought help after repeatedly dreaming he was losing his family. Professional encounters respond to the same principle. Assuming you work with competent, collaborative people magnetizes exactly those people into your orbit. Assuming business is difficult and people are dishonest guarantees finding confirmatory evidence. The business world doesn't change. Your frequency determines which aspect of it you experience. Crowds respond to individual internal states. Goddard documented a speaker who, before every presentation, assumed the audience was receptive, intelligent, and eager to learn. His lectures consistently received excellent responses. When he occasionally forgot this internal preparation and went on stage anxious, the identical presentation received lukewarm audience response. Every significant encounter in your life responds to a transmission you're emitting from your deepest consciousness layer. People appear to fulfill roles in the drama you're internally scripting. Changing the cast requires rewriting the internal script. When you assume a new state with sufficient conviction, the universe reorganizes encounters to correspond, bringing people who confirm your new story about yourself and life. Quantum physics has experimentally validated what mystics understood for millennia. Observation determines what manifests in physical reality. In the double-slit experiment, electrons behave as probability waves until observed. At observation, the wave function collapses and the electron assumes definite position. Your consciousness operates identically on macroscopic scale. Werner Heisenberg, quantum mechanics pioneer, stated we don't observe nature itself, but nature exposed to our questioning method. Jung and Goddard grasped this decades before scientific formalization. Each visible synchronicity is infinite possibilities, collapsing into a specific event determined by the conscious observer. The most dramatic Jung documented case occurred during therapy. The patient, extremely rational and resistant, was describing a dream about a golden scarab, an Egyptian rebirth symbol. At that precise moment, a rare golden beetle, Cetonia aurata, tapped the office window. Jung opened the window, caught the insect, and handed it to her. The synchronicity was the visible collapse of one specific possibility among infinite ones, orchestrated by the psychological necessity of that moment. Goddard mapped the exact mechanism. Your focused imagination selects which timeline you experience. Infinite versions of each moment exist. The version you experience is determined by the consciousness state you occupy. An architect repeatedly visualized a specific project that didn't yet exist. Every detail, every line. Months later, a client approached with a request corresponding exactly to his visualization, including details the client couldn't have known. Premonitory dreams reveal consciousness's non-linear nature. You dream a specific scene, then live it. The dream didn't predict the future. Your consciousness accessed the field where all moments coexist and selected that possibility to collapse into experience. Goddard documented hundreds of cases where people dreamed specific events they later created by maintaining the dream's feeling. The revision technique operates through this quantum principle. Before sleep, you mentally review the day's events, but reimagine them as you would have preferred. One woman revised a marital argument every night, reimagining harmony instead of conflict. Her husband began changing without her saying anything. He reported confused memories of the argument, remembering it as less severe than it had been. The revision was literally rewriting the past in consciousness's quantum field. Living from the end, Goddard's central technique. means mentally occupying the desired future state until it collapses into present reality. An unknown musician imagined receiving applause in a specific theater he'd never visited. He visualized every detail: the stage, the lights, the sensation. 6 months later, a series of coincidences led him to perform in exactly that theater, exactly as imagined. Time doesn't function as we assume. Past, present, and future exist simultaneously in the quantum field. Your focused consciousness determines which configuration of infinite possibilities crystallizes into linear experience. This explains why you can change the past by changing how you observe it now. And you can experience the future by assuming its reality in the present. Goddard discovered the consciousness state occupied before sleep is particularly powerful for reality selection. In the hypnagogic state, conscious mind releases control and you directly access the mechanism collapsing possibilities. A woman in debt fell asleep nightly feeling prosperous, imaginarily holding high-value checks. Within 3 months, an unexpected inheritance from a distant relative she didn't know existed materialized exactly the values she'd imagined. Doubt and contradiction create distorted or incomplete collapses. When you oscillate between consciousness states, reality manifests this oscillation as contradictory, confusing events. Clarity and consistency in internal state produce clean, rapid manifestations. One businessman maintained absolute certainty about a specific contract despite contrary evidence. The favored competitor inexplicably withdrew at the final hour. Observation changes the observed even retroactively. Quantum delayed choice experiments prove present decisions affect past particle states. Goddard applied this practically by observing any situation from the desired outcome's perspective as already realized. You reorganize the entire causality chain leading to it. Each moment contains infinite superposed possibilities awaiting collapse determined by your conscious observation. Synchronicities are visible evidence of this collapse occurring, the universe reorganizing itself to correspond with the state your consciousness is selecting. You're not watching reality unfold. You're actively selecting which reality to experience through each conscious observation act. Life responds not to what you desire, but to what you assume as real in your observing consciousness's deep field. Synchronicities aren't uniform. Each type carries specific messages, operates through distinct mechanisms, requires different responses. Goddard identified 4 main categories the universe uses for human consciousness communication. Warning synchronicities emerge as interruptions in normal event flow. 3 consecutive appointment cancellations with the same client. The car refusing to start precisely on the trip day. The important document vanishing before signing. These aren't random obstacles. They're the consciousness field signaling you're moving against the natural current of what's trying to emerge. Jung documented that consistently ignoring warnings leads to more dramatic interruptions. One woman ignored multiple partnership signs, vanishing documents, pens failing at signing, sudden pre-meeting illnesses. She signed anyway. The partner defrauded her within 6 months. Confirmation synchronicities operate inversely. Doors open effortlessly. Right people appear with perfect timing. Resources emerge exactly when needed. Goddard discovered these synchronicities accelerate when aligned with what he termed the path of promise. An inventor faced months of patent obstacles. He changed his approach, and immediately 3 independent investors sought him out the same week. None knew about the others. All sensed he had something valuable. Prophetic synchronicities show literal future glimpses through dreams, visions, or sudden knowing. They differ from creative imagination by arriving spontaneously, carrying specific details you couldn't have consciously constructed. A secretary dreamed of a specific address, 1346 Boulevard West, in a city she'd never visited. 2 years later, an unexpected transfer took her to that city. The available apartment had exactly that address. Goddard taught these prophetic synchronicities increase when you develop anxiety-free observation, allowing consciousness field communication without ego interference. Manifestation synchronicities are internal states taking direct external form. You sustain a specific feeling, and the universe organizes its materialization through paths the logical mind could never trace. Consider this. A teacher consistently visualized a specific value, $50,000, without determining the source. He maintained the feeling of already possessing this amount. His distant uncle, unseen for decades, died leaving him exactly $50,000. The will had been written the week visualizations began. The fundamental principle Goddard discovered: signs follow, never precede. You don't wait for signs to act. You assume the desired state first. Then synchronicities appear, confirming or correcting your trajectory. People waste years waiting for signs to begin when signs only appear after you establish clear direction through your assumed consciousness state. Repeated numbers carry coded messages about current alignment. Constantly seeing 222 indicates visualizations are materializing. Continue maintaining the state. 555 signals profound changes organizing in the invisible field. 999 marks cycle conclusions. These numbers appear at precise moments, waking exactly at 4:44. Receipts totaling $33.33. Important documents containing 777 words. The field constantly communicates through this numerical language. Casual encounters are never casual. Each person crossing your path significantly responds to a summons from your consciousness state. The stranger mentioning exactly the book you need. The friend calling with your problem's solution without knowing you had that problem. The specialist appearing precisely when you need that specific expertise. Obstacles are disguised redirections. Goddard discovered when something seemingly perfect becomes impossible to achieve, something better is always organizing. A woman lost her dream house to another buyer. Devastated, she maintained the feeling of living in the perfect house. 3 months later, she found a superior house in every aspect for the same price in a location she didn't know she desired until she saw it. Distinguishing psychological projection from genuine synchronicity requires practice. True synchronicities carry numinous quality. You know in the moment something significant is happening. They appear with timing impossible to consciously orchestrate. They carry information you didn't possess. They produce measurable external reality changes. But here's what most people miss about working with synchronicities consciously. There's a specific state of awareness required to both recognize and amplify them. It's not passive observation. It's active participation without attachment. When you start demanding synchronicities as proof, they disappear. When you become desperate for signs, you're in the wrong frequency. The state that amplifies synchronicity is one of curious openness combined with inner certainty. You're certain about the internal state you're occupying, curious about how it will manifest externally. This is where the practice deepens. Take a moment right now and comment below with this phrase: I recognize the signs, not as wishful thinking, not as affirmation practice, but as a declaration to the field that you're ready to participate consciously in this conversation. You're signaling that you understand synchronicity isn't something that happens to you randomly, but something that emerges in response to your consciousness state. This simple act of declaring it creates a shift in the field. It's an interruption in your previous pattern. Each synchronicity is the universe actively participating in your journey, responding to the states you sustain, guiding through symbols and events. You've never been alone in this process. The intelligence organizing synchronicities is constantly available, waiting only for you to learn its language and consciously participate in the conversation. And here's something Goddard emphasized that most people overlook. The speed at which synchronicities manifest is directly related to the naturalness of the feeling state you're occupying. Force creates resistance. Ease creates flow. Think about the last time something manifested effortlessly in your life. You weren't straining. You weren't obsessing. You had assumed it so completely that it felt natural, and then it simply appeared. That's the state. That's the frequency. Most people approach manifestation and synchronicity from a state of lack, which only generates more experiences of lacking. The shift happens when you occupy the end state so completely that looking for signs feels unnecessary. Paradoxically, that's when signs multiply. If what you're discovering here is touching something in you, if this is clicking with experiences you've had but couldn't explain, then I invite you to subscribe not just to this channel, but to this frequency. This isn't about consuming content. It's about joining a space where we're actively exploring and embodying these principles together. It's about staying in conversation with others who recognize that reality is far more fluid and responsive than we were taught. The more of us operating from this understanding, the more these patterns become visible, the more the collective field shifts. There's a specific practice you can begin tonight that will accelerate your synchronicity recognition dramatically. Before sleep, in that hypnagogic state Goddard emphasized, review your day but with a specific lens. Identify every moment that could have been a synchronicity you missed. That person who mentioned something that seemed random but might have been relevant. That advertisement you scrolled past without really seeing. That thought that crossed your mind that you dismissed. Review these moments with the assumption that they were communications you didn't yet recognize. Don't force meaning onto them. Just observe them with curious awareness. What happens when you do this consistently is remarkable. Your consciousness begins developing what Goddard called the seeing eye. You start noticing patterns you were previously blind to. Symbols that were always there become visible. The conversation that was always happening becomes audible. And as your recognition increases, the synchronicities themselves increase. Not because they weren't happening before, but because you're finally tuned to the frequency where they're broadcasting. Jung discovered something crucial about this process that most people miss. Synchronicities intensify during transitions. When you're on the threshold between old and new, when you're in liminal space, the field becomes more active, more communicative. Those moments when life feels chaotic or uncertain, those are often when synchronicities are most intense, because the field is trying to guide you through the transition. But if you're in fear or resistance, you miss the signs entirely. This is why Goddard emphasized maintaining the desired state, especially during challenging circumstances. It's easy to feel prosperous when money is flowing. The real practice is feeling prosperous when the bank account is low. It's easy to feel loved when someone is expressing love. The practice is feeling loved when you're alone. because that's when you're actually impressing the consciousness field with the pattern you want reflected back to you. Here's something else that changes everything. Synchronicities often arrive in clusters, not in isolation. When you notice one, start paying acute attention because more are likely forming. It's like the field testing whether you're paying attention. One meaningful coincidence is interesting. 3 in rapid succession is a clear signal. 5 in a week is the universe practically shouting. And if you acknowledge them, if you respond with awareness, the communication intensifies. The revision technique deserves deeper exploration because it's one of the most powerful yet underutilized tools Goddard taught. Most people think revision is about wishful thinking or denying what happened. It's not. It's about understanding that the past as you remember it is not fixed. Your memory of an event is not the event itself. It's a mental construct that you're accessing now, in the present. And since the present is where all power resides, you can reconstruct that memory, impress a new version onto your consciousness, and watch as the effects of that revision ripple forward into your current experience. People who practice revision consistently report something extraordinary. Others begin remembering events differently too. Not because you've manipulated them, but because you've shifted something in the quantum field where that memory exists. The past becomes fluid. This sounds impossible only if you're still operating from a linear time framework. But if you understand what quantum physics has proven, that time is not actually linear at the fundamental level. Revision becomes not just possible, but logical. Now, as we move toward integration, toward embodying this understanding practically, drop one word in the comments that captures the transformation you're choosing. Not the transformation you hope for, the transformation you're claiming. One word that represents the shift in consciousness you're occupying now. This isn't casual engagement. This is your energetic signature being declared to the quantum field. The more clearly you claim your new state, the more precisely synchronicities align to confirm it. And here's the final piece that completes the understanding. Synchronicity and manifestation are not separate processes. They're the same mechanism viewed from different angles. Manifestation is you selecting a reality. Synchronicity is that reality assembling itself through the bridge of incidents. You don't manifest and then experience synchronicities. The synchronicities are the manifestation becoming visible. They're the breadcrumbs showing you the path is forming, the confirmation that the field is responding, the evidence that the conversation is active. The intelligence organizing these patterns is not separate from you. It's not an external force you're petitioning. It's the deeper dimension of your own consciousness interfacing with the unified field that generates reality. When you understand this, the entire dynamic shifts. You're not asking permission. You're not hoping for favors. You're consciously directing the creative mechanism you've been unconsciously operating your entire life. Subscribe not just to stay connected, but to stay coherent, to remain in alignment with this understanding even when external circumstances seem to contradict it. Because that's when the practice becomes real. That's when you discover whether you truly understand this or whether it's just interesting information. The more of us who embody this, who live from this understanding, who maintain these states regardless of appearances, the more the collective field shifts, the more reality itself becomes obviously responsive to consciousness. And if you feel moved to share this with someone in your life who's been searching for answers, know that this act creates its own synchronicity. You're not just passing along information. You're creating a resonance in the field that benefits both of you. opening pathways for new patterns to emerge in both your experiences. You're not learning something new. You're remembering what you've always known but forgot. You're returning to a natural way of being that's been obscured by conditioning and consensus reality. And as you remember, as you reclaim this conscious participation in the creative process, everything changes. Not because the universe suddenly started working differently, but because you're finally working with it consciously instead of against it unconsciously. The conversation has always been happening. The synchronicities have always been present. The signs have always been there. The only question is, are you ready to read them? Now, understanding synchronicity is crucial, but there's something even more fundamental happening beneath these signs and symbols. The reason synchronicities appear at all is because you're transmitting a specific frequency into the field, and maintaining that frequency consistently is where most people lose their manifestation power. In my next video, Stop Losing Your Quantum Frequency: How to Keep High Vibration All Day, I break down exactly why your frequency drops throughout the day and the precise techniques to sustain the state that generates synchronicities effortlessly, even when circumstances seem to contradict what you're claiming.